You know, there are these moments in life when a single, simple question can change everything. And I'm not talking about a question about the future, but one about the past. A question about the stories we've all inherited, right? The foundations we think we're standing on, the truths we've just been told to accept. But what if those stories, what if they're incomplete? There's actually a concept in Indian philosophy for this exact thing, this act of hiding the truth. It's called Avarana. It's like a veil, and it has this partner, Vikshippa, which is the illusion that gets projected onto the veil. So this whole explainer, it's about what happens when someone finally decides to peek behind that veil.
So yeah, you can think of Avarana as the curtain that hides what's real. And Vikshippa? That's the movie being projected onto the curtain, the story we're shown instead of the truth. And what's so wild is that these aren't just, dusty old philosophical ideas. No way. They are active, living forces shaping the world all around us right now. You can see it in the history we learned in school, in the big national stories we all celebrate, and even in the smaller, private stories our own families tell themselves. It's like they build this invisible architecture around how we see things, a structure that's really just designed to keep us comfortable, to keep everything nice and simple.
So, what happens when a little crack appears in that story we've always known? What's the real cost? The real cost of wanting to see past that veil. And honestly, are we ever really prepared for what we might find on the other side? Well, this is a story about that exact journey. It's the story of one woman's profound and, pretty uncomfortable quest to lift that veil. And it all starts in a place of ruins.
Okay, so let's begin our journey here, among the sun-baked stones and the just silent ruins of Hampi. This is where we meet our main character, Razia. She's a really successful filmmaker, and she's here on a professional assignment. But as she's standing there, looking out over the Tungabhadra River, this incredible landscape of both breathtaking beauty and just total destruction, she starts to feel this deep, unsettling disquiet. You know that feeling? When something just doesn't add up? The story she's supposed to be telling, and the story these ancient stones seem to be whispering to her, they're not the same story at all.
See, her project comes with one of those unwritten rules. It's part of a government initiative, to promote tolerance and harmony. And she's been, let's say, gently guided to show the destruction here in a softer light. The whole point is to create a very specific story, one that carefully steps around any uncomfortable questions about who actually destroyed these incredible structures, and more importantly, why. It is, for all intents and purposes, an official request to create a veil, a new Avarana, all for the sake of a neatly prescribed harmony.
But here's the thing. Razia is an artist, and for her, the camera is supposed to be an instrument of truth. So this inner conflict really comes to a head when she's framing a shot of this massive, mutilated idol of Ugra Narasimha. The artistry is just breathtaking, but so is the sheer violence that's literally etched into its broken form. Later, when she's trying to explain this feeling to her husband, Amir, she gets to the heart of it. To just gloss over the who and the why of it all, that's not just softening the light, that's deception. It would be a lie to her audience, and maybe even worse, a lie to herself.
Now, Amir, her husband, he has this very deep-seated Marxist worldview, and he offers her a pretty sophisticated explanation. He says, look, what you're seeing, it's not really religious violence. It's a class rebellion. It's the oppressed working class rising up against their feudal rulers and destroying the temples because they were symbols of power. And, it's a neat, tidy explanation. It fits perfectly into a certain way of seeing the world, but for Razia, it just feels hollow. It doesn't really connect with actual human experience. She remembers the story from her own village about these two factions that were bitterly fighting over land, but they would never touch each other's places of worship. So she's left with this very simple, very human question. Would the same devout sculptors who carved these idols with so much love and devotion, would they then turn around and smash the faces of their own gods? It just doesn't make sense to her.
And right then, something shifts deep inside her. That image of the broken Narasimha, it's no longer just about an intellectual debate with her husband. It unlocks a memory she has buried for 28 years. See, when she, born as Lakshmi, left her family and her faith to marry Amir, her father said these really chilling words to her. At the time, she just dismissed them, as the ramblings of an old traditionalist. But now, standing here, surrounded by all these ruins, his prophecy suddenly echoes with this terrifying, unsettling clarity. The crack in the official story has just collided with a crack in her own personal history.
So that feeling of disquiet, it doesn't leave her, it sticks with her. And then, soon after, she gets the news that her father has passed away. And just like that, Razia finds herself driving back to the village she left behind decades ago. This is a journey into a past she thought she had completely sealed off, forever.
And she's expecting to find the home of a simple man, maybe even a bigoted man, based on her memories. But what she discovers instead? Well, it's not just going to change how she sees him, it's going to completely shatter the foundations of her own identity.
In this small, locked room, she finds not the simple belongings you'd expect from a farmer. She finds a vast, meticulously organized library, a library of a true scholar. We're talking 3 enormous bookshelves, just overflowing with books. She sees translations of the Holy Quran, biographies of the Prophet, and then, critically, she finds these contemporary Persian chronicles, written by medieval Muslim historians themselves, books like the Masir al-Alamgiri. And right next to them are huge volumes of Will Durant's Story of Civilization, books on world religions, and every single one is heavily underlined, filled with detailed notes written in both Kannada and a surprisingly fluent English. This wasn't the library of a simple villager. This was the secret archive of a hidden, incredibly rigorous mind. And in that moment, this staggering realization just hits her like a ton of bricks. For her big, humpy documentary, she'd been relying on what? Tourist handbooks and other people's interpretations, basically pre-digested stories. But her father, the man she had dismissed her whole life as an uneducated villager, he had bypassed all of that. He had gone straight to the primary sources. He was wrestling with the raw, unvarnished facts of history, while she had been perfectly content with the polished, comfortable veil. And right there, in that dusty room, a new resolve is born. She has to understand what her father understood. She has to follow the path that he laid out.
So Razia just immerses herself in her father's library. She starts following the trail of his notes, his questions, his discoveries. And as she reads, the comfortable, progressive worldview that she has so carefully built over her entire adult life, it begins to crumble, piece by painful piece. The history she starts uncovering from these primary sources is so much more complex and frankly more troubling and violent than the sanitized version she was always taught to believe.
I mean, take for example what happens when she starts looking into the popular story of Tipu Sultan. This is a figure she's always been taught to see as a secular hero, a freedom fighter. But her father's research, which pulls directly from primary accounts, including Tipu's own dream journal, paints a starkly different picture. It details these acts of immense religious fanaticism and cruelty, a record that just completely contradicts the heroic myth. And she realizes this myth wasn't some accident of history. It was a carefully constructed veil, an Avarana, created purely for political and ideological convenience. The true history she now sees was deliberately buried.
Now, this newfound understanding puts her on a collision course with the philosophy of her beloved mentor, a man named Professor Sastry. He actually writes to her, concerned about what he calls her newfound sentimentality. He reminds her of his core teaching, which is that history isn't just a neutral collection of facts. No, it has a noble goal. Its whole purpose is to be shaped, to be curated, and to be used as a tool to help humanity march forward towards a more progressive future. So in his view, these inconvenient truths, they aren't just unhelpful, they're actually obstacles to a greater good. But then, in the middle of all these complex arguments and ideological justifications, Razia finds a simple, powerful note left by her father. It's just 4 words that cut through all the noise. History is a quest for truth. That's it. It's not a tool for progress, it's not a weapon for ideology, it's not a story to make us comfortable, it's a quest. And this becomes her new foundation, her guiding principle. And it's what sets the stage for the ultimate confrontation. The climax of Razia's entire journey doesn't happen in a dusty ruin or a hidden library. No, it takes place in a sterile conference room in Delhi. The government has put together this big seminar with all the nation's most famous progressive scholars. And what's their stated purpose? To revise history textbooks, to, quote, erase shameless lies and promote national harmony. Or, to put it another way, their job is to professionalize the art of Avarana, to weave an official, state-sanctioned veil over the past. So, as the chairperson is up there talking about purging perversions of truth about medieval rulers, Razia, who is registered for the conference under her birth name, Lakshmi, she can't stay silent any longer. She stands up, and her voice cuts right through that thick academic consensus. She doesn't offer some grand counter-theory or a complicated argument. Instead, she asks a simple, almost disarming question, a question that brings this whole abstract debate crashing down to a single, tangible physical reality. A scholar on the panel basically dismisses her, claiming there's no scientific evidence that a particular mosque in Benares was built after demolishing a temple. And this is where all that time spent in her father's library pays off. Calmly, she counters. Not with her opinion, but with a primary source. She quotes directly from the Maser Alamgiri, which was the official court chronicle of Aurangzeb's reign, a book commissioned by the emperor's own prime minister. And the text, she points out, explicitly records the emperor receiving a report back in 1669 confirming the successful demolition of the Kashivishwarnath temple, exactly as he had ordered. The veil of denial is pierced by a simple, undeniable fact.
But her argument then moves beyond just historical fact to a much deeper, more profound moral question. She points out that Hindu society has spent decades openly confronting its own historical mistakes, like the caste system, and has made these genuine, often painful efforts to reform. So why, she asks the room, are the so-called intellectual elites so determined to deny Muslim society that very same opportunity for growth? By creating a sanitized history, by insisting that no wrongs were ever committed, aren't they just preventing the very self-reflection that is absolutely essential for any community to evolve?
And that moment, right there in the seminar, that really marks the culmination of her entire journey. It's the moment she finally lifts the veil, not just for everyone else in that room, but truly for herself. She has finally managed to integrate her father's quiet, lonely quest for truth with her own public voice as an artist and a thinker. Her transformation is now almost complete.
And this right here, is the heart of her new understanding. She makes it so clear that this whole quest for truth, it's not about assigning blame. It's not about vilifying people who are alive today. It's about building moral courage. Because by honestly acknowledging the wrongs of the past, a community isn't taking on guilt. Instead, it's demonstrating its own moral evolution. It's basically saying, we don't subscribe to the crimes of our ancestors. We have chosen a different path. And that honesty, she argues, is the only real way to break the cycle.
So the ultimate insight, really, is this. Big ideas like national integration and brotherhood, they just can't be built on a foundation of lies or concealment. It's impossible. A shared future has to be based on a shared, truthful understanding of the past, no matter how painful that past might be. Real healing, real progress, it comes from realization. And realization can only be born from honesty. Anything else is just, well, it's just a more elaborate veil.
And ultimately, it's important to see that this journey isn't really about declaring one version of history as the correct one. The true focus is on the human story. It's the story of one woman's profound inner shift. It's about her willingness to question everything, her career, her marriage, her very identity, all for a personal quest to have an honest relationship with the past. It's really about the courage it takes to choose an uncomfortable truth over a comfortable illusion.
I mean, think about it. Her journey started with a single crack in a story, an aesthetic and intellectual problem she noticed while looking at a broken statue in Hampi, but it ended with this deep, moral and personal reckoning, an attempt to mend her own broken relationship with truth itself. It's a transformation from just observing a broken world to actually trying to heal a fractured self.
And so, her story leaves us with a final, lingering question. Razia's journey was about the veils of history, right? The stories that are curated to make us feel more comfortable. But really, her journey is an invitation for us to look inward. So the question is, what are the veils, the Avaranas, that we still wear in our own lives? What inherited stories, whether they are personal or collective, do we just leave unexamined? And what might we discover if we finally found the courage, just as she did, to gently lift them?